Good evening, everyone. The Town of Los Gatos Planning Commission meeting of November 8th, 2023 is now called to order. And as we begin the meeting, as always, we'll ask staff to make a presentation regarding the town's rules on civility and decorum.
Thank you, Chair. For the benefit of the community, the Town of Los Gatos asks that you follow the town's meeting guidelines while attending town meetings and treat everyone with respect and dignity.
Thank you for that. And we'll move on to the roll call. Commissioner Hanson?
Here.
Commissioner Thomas?
Here.
Commissioner Janov?
Here.
And I am here, and we'll note that Commissioner Raspy and Commissioner Burnett are not here tonight, nor is Commissioner Kylie Clark. Okay. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, and Commissioner Hanson will lead us tonight.
Hello? All right, please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So in light of our small number of attendees tonight, I'm going to abbreviate my usual rules of the road remarks, but I will ask that you silent your devices if you haven't already done so. And participants can only participate when they're called on by the chair, and then you'll speak to the mic, or for those who on Zoom will use their raise hand feature. And no member of the public is allowed to speak a second time. And there's no yielding of time to another speaker. So as the Planning Commission conducts its meeting this evening, we strongly encourage active participation by the public, which is important to the essential work of our democracy and to the work of the Planning Commission. Public input is always very welcome and carefully considered. Written comments about the agenda items may be submitted to the staff prior to the meeting, and during the meeting there are two opportunities for members to participate. The first is during verbal communications, where you can speak on a matter that is not on the calendar for tonight's meeting. And during the hearings on our agenda items 2 and 3, any member may speak about those items. Let me see here. If you wish to address the Commission under verbal communications or on items 2 and 3, please turn in a card if you haven't already done that to staff, and we have someone on Zoom. Anyone else may wish to join. And so we'll move on to verbal communications and ask if anyone, members of the public, are willing, desirous of addressing the Commission on any matter that's not on the agenda. I don't see anyone. I don't have any cards.
And there are no hands raised on Zoom.
Okay, thank you very much. And so we'll now move on to the consent calendar, and we have no matters on the consent calendar for this evening. And so we'll, give me a second, begin with item 1, where we are asked to consider an appeal of a Community Development Department director decision to deny a fence height exception request to relocate an existing 6-foot tall fence within the required street side yard setback on property zoned R18, located at 501 Roxbury Lane, APN 407-31026, categorically exempt pursuant to the guidelines for implementation of CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act, Section 15303, new construction or conversion of small structures, and 15301, existing facilities. Fence height exception here is application FHE-23-004. The property owner and the appellant is Mr. Jared Suzev. Please correct me if I have your name wrong. Apologize for that in advance. And our project planner is Maria Shavarin. And I'll ask my commissioners if they have visited the property. That's unanimous. And are there any disclosures? I do not see any. So we'll now ask Ms. Shavarin to make a staff presentation for this evening on this item. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Planning Commissioners. The item before you this evening is an appeal of a Community Development Director decision to deny a fence height exception request at 501 Roxbury Lane. The property zoning is R18 or Single Family Residential Zone. This property is located on the corner of Moore Avenue and Roxbury Lane. The property owner is requesting approval to relocate an existing 6-foot tall wooden fence within the required 15-foot street side yard setback. The fence would be located on the street side yard property line fronting Moore Avenue. Per town code, fences and gates within a side yard abutting a street are limited to 3 feet in height. On August 18th, 2023, a fence height exception request was received for the 6-foot tall fence. Town code allows an exception to any of the fence regulations if one of the required conditions can be met. The applicant stated concerns related to privacy and security. The applicant also included a concern related to noise. A noise concern is not listed as required condition. The applicant also included a concern related to, I'm a little bit nervous. Based on the noted concerns, staff could not support the fence height exception request. On September 29th, 2023, the property owner appealed this denial to the Planning Commission. On October 8th, 2023, the property owner provided additional justification related to the loss of animals in the neighborhood and containment of their pet. Based on the discussions provided in the staff report, staff recommends that the Planning Commission deny the appeal, uphold the decision of the Community Development Director, and deny the fence height exception. This will conclude staff's presentation, and I believe we also have staff with Parks and Public Works present, and we are happy to answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that presentation. I'll ask my fellow commissioners if they have any questions for you at this time. I do not see any. So we'll move on to the opportunity for we'll open the public portion of the public hearing, and give the appellant up to 5 minutes to make a presentation. And please come to the mic and state your name and address. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. My name is Jared Suzoff. I am the property owner at 501 Roxbury Lane. I am appealing the fence height exception denial that I have. There is a current 6-foot fence at the property right now. We've had a recent remodel which is forcing us to move the fence as it stands. So any addition, any movement of the fence, to my understanding, needs to be 3 feet tall. It is a side yard. It is my backyard that is exposed to the foot traffic, the animals, the cars that run up and down Moore Avenue. So that is my concern. If you notice the existing neighborhood fences entirely south on Moore Avenue, which is effectively every other house that is adjacent on Moore Avenue, it is a 6-foot tall fence, and it is butted up right to the property line. So it will maintain consistent appeal with the rest of the neighborhood, with the rest of the fences, not just on Moore Avenue, but within the surrounding community. I've expressed this concern with all of my neighbors. They all are in favor of me moving the fence. They know nobody has any concerns. I even have people that live directly next to me that have offered to come and support this cause. We do have an intersection. It is the corner of Moore and Roxbury. We have a traffic problem at that corner where we have kids that drive recklessly there. This fence adds added protection from kids spinning donuts in this intersection that has been happening since long before I moved into the property. So with that said, safety and concern for my family, for my children, for my pets is number one. Consistency with the appeal and the curbside visualness of the neighborhood is in consideration here. All the other houses up and down Moore Avenue have 6-foot fences, and this would look exactly like the rest of them. So I'm happy to answer any questions or comments or concerns because I don't really understand why it's being denied. So thank you.
Thank you for that, and stand by for questions from the commissioners. If you would stay at the mic, we'll just check. Commissioner Hanson?
Does your existing 6-foot fence contain your pet?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Other questions? I think by the way, we have received the notices from your neighbors that you submitted to the staff, so
Yes.
we have all that. You mentioned that there was a crash in the vicinity, or actually your own property. Can you
Yeah.
tell me when that was?
It was November of 2014. So it's been a while, but the kids drive recklessly there consistently. They spin donuts in front of my house, basically, is what happened. So the previous owners put a tree up to help stop that. There used to be junipers there that grew out of control that helped stop that, but those are not in the vicinity anymore.
I see. Have you called the Los Gatos police when there's reckless drivers?
I have, and we're working on something to create a long-term solution for that as well.
Okay, I appreciate that. Let me see. You state in your appeal that the 18-inch from the curb setback would, I can get the right word here, basically enhance the appearance of the property, and I was wondering in what way you mentioned that.
Yeah, if you look, there are photos of the way the property is set up right now, and it has a very strange angle to where it's set up right now. So moving the fence out would give us the ability to maintain a consistent visual appeal. It would allow us to put rocks or something in there that the dogs wouldn't dig up as they walk through that area, and make it more uniform with the rest of the house, the property, and again, the houses that run up and down the rest of the street. They all have roughly between a 12 and 18-foot setback from their fence and the property line. So make it consistent with everything else on Moore Avenue.
Do I correctly understand that the only issue you're asking the commission to deal with on your fence height exception is safety and security?
Yeah.
Okay, appreciate that. And if I have anything else for you? Okay, I think we're getting through this. Okay, I think I've exhausted my questions. I'll ask commissioners again if they have any questions for you. If not, thank you very much. And we will now ask, you can have a seat, please. We'll now ask if any members of the public wish to come to the mic and speak. And we have a card from Mr. Tannenbaum. Tannenbaum. Sorry, my eyes.
I'm going to read directly from a paper because I give a lot of lectures, and I've been told more than twice I'm very verbose.
Okay, thank you.
The answer. So my name is Jesse Tannenbaum. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm the immediate next-door neighbor to the north of the property in question, and we share a property line, which we have rebuilt the fence between the two properties because it was poorly constructed. A shorter 3-foot fence would not look in sync and is not in step with the neighborhood, as you've already heard. I drove around for several blocks, not a scientific study, and saw many side yards and backyards face the roadway and have 6-foot fence in place. In fact, it's probably more than the majority, but I didn't take an exact count. Just catty-corner across the street is a 6-foot fence that goes on past the water treatment plant, 3-4 blocks away. Also, as a pediatrician, there's a safety factor involved. There are the family's 2 grade school children who play in the yard area that is fenced in. Although we live in Los Gatos, I've been there 30 years, a very safe town, things are not like they were when I was growing up 60 years ago. That's just the way the world is. In summary, I fully support the approval of a 6-foot fence on the adjacent property with no objection at all. I'm open to any questions if there be.
Yeah, thank you for that, and we'll ask if there are any questions. I don't see any hands raised, so thank you very much.
Thanks for allowing me to speak.
Mr. So we'll ask the applicant if you wish to make any further comments, up to 3 minutes. You don't have to. Okay.
Through the chair, let's just check to make sure that we don't
on
have
Zoom?
anyone on Zoom who
Sorry.
wishes to speak as a
Thanks
member
for
of
the
the
reminder.
public. I do not see any hands raised, but thank you.
Thank you for that. So we'll now close the public portion of the public meeting, and I'll ask commissioners if they have any questions of staff. Commissioner?
Before we close the public portion,
Thomas.
can I just ask the applicant? I know that they didn't. Is that okay?
Certainly.
Okay. Can I just ask you one question? Thank you. I was just wondering if there were any alternatives that you have tried to think about or implement instead of moving the fence.
So as I mentioned earlier, there were junipers there before. Unfortunately, when we moved in, these junipers grew out of control. So we did remove them because they actually didn't follow the city code as it was. What we noticed during the time that we did have the junipers and upon removal of them is they were more of a nuisance than anything. They were homes to rats and rodents and possums, and not to mention, because of the large amount of high school foot traffic we have there, we also pulled an abundance of alcohol bottles out of there. So it was a littering can for people to dispose of stuff they probably shouldn't have been consuming. So we've had that. We decided that's probably not the best solution for it. A 6-foot fence is the best and safest way to keep the yard enclosed.
Can I follow?
Please.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so would you consider some sort of additional screen if you aren't able to move the fence all the way up for because of street and pedestrian safety reasons, all the way up to the 18 inches that you're requesting? Would you consider something in between where you would be able to plant some sort of physical barrier also that would help with that additional protection and not just have that be open space?
I would absolutely be open to putting something else there in addition.
Okay.
18 inches is where we started with, and to be honest, we did have the traffic consultant come out and look at the property line, and based on his visibility and knowledge of the area, he said there was no issues. So I'm happy with anything that we can do to keep a 6-foot fence in place.
Okay. And then my last question is just that I just want to confirm, you've mentioned in your letter that you've submitted and everything, you want to protect your kids and your dog and everything. So just to confirm, part of our job and part of the fence ordinance is to keep to keep the walkway and the pedestrians safe also. So I just wanted to confirm with you that that's like a priority for you also.
It absolutely
Thank you.
is, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we'll go back to my commissioners and see if they have any questions for staff, comment, or wish to make a motion. Commissioner Janoff.
I do. Do we need to close the public?
You might as well make it official.
I
Close
thought
it
I
again.
did, but if not, we'll
But
close it.
it was reopened, so we can reclose it.
I see. Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you. I do have a question for staff. The issue before us, this is probably for, do we have traffic?
We do. We've got Parks and Public Works here behind, as well as Mike Roman, Senior Traffic Engineer, on Zoom.
Okay, so my question for this particular lot is, I noted, I think, in the staff report that traffic didn't see an issue with the 6-foot fence being moved out to the location proposed. And I just wanted to verify is that a correct reading of what was in the staff report?
James Watson, if you'd like to start, but we can also, it looks like Mike Roman has his hand up, if you'd like. All right, we'll get him switched over. Mike Roman is connecting to audio. He'll be able to answer that question shortly.
Good evening, Commissioners.
Go ahead.
Yes,
Good evening.
I went out to this. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Good evening, Commissioners. I did go out to the site on September 19th and investigated. There is a 4-way stop. It is a big intersection with large turning radii. And the proposed fence would not create a sight distance or a pedestrian safety hazard. There'd be adequate sight for kids on their scooters and bikes. And because it is a 4-way intersection and because it is so big, this is an exception to ordinarily there are concerns, but this is an exception. And if you have any further questions, please feel free to ask.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I wanted to make a comment as a result of that. I think that personally I could find that there's a special circumstance with regard to the configuration of this lot that would enable me to allow a 6-foot fence in the proposed location. It's a very unusual corner lot in the sense that it flares out at the front of it, so you've got quite a bit of visual for traffic and pedestrians as well. Furthermore, the driveway of the house is away from the corner, and so we really don't have any issue with regard to sight line as the residents' cars are entering traffic or exiting traffic. So, and lastly, when I look at the property on site, it's a big patch of dirt. No offense to the homeowner, it could be landscaped, which would be beautiful, but it wouldn't benefit the use of the property to the family. And so I'm inclined to say, since we don't have a traffic issue, and we're not talking about a fence that would completely cover up the entire side, well, it does cover up the entire side of the house, I would feel comfortable with a 6-foot fence there. I might be more comfortable if it didn't come quite so far out to the corner of the house, a little bit more of the house being revealed, but I would be okay with it either way.
Thank you. Commissioner Thomas?
I want to echo Commissioner Janoff's comments. I agree. In my initial, after my site visit and reading all the materials and getting confirmation from traffic, the consulting, with regards to pedestrian safety and everything, I agree. And I think that most of the time, oftentimes this has become problematic when this is next to a driveway, and that there's no case. It's not near at all, and it is this very wide open, very unusual. The lot size is unusual, and I would say that the lot size is not unusual. The lot configuration, I think, qualifies as a special circumstance in my eyes, and I'm comfortable with making that finding. And so I would support this appeal.
Mr. Hanson, comment?
These are always really hard. Commissioner Janet and I both worked on the fence ordinance when it was the desire of the town council to go there. And one of the issues that we had to grapple with when we were doing the fence ordinance was existing fences. And so, the neighborhood compatibility argument is not anywhere in the fence ordinance, because it was known at the time that there would be all kinds of 6-foot fences that did not meet the fence ordinance guidelines, and that would be grandfathered as we move forward with these fences. That said, the reasons for doing the fence ordinance were very compelling from the town council's perspective when it went into our code in 2019. And so now we're in the situation where, an applicant wants to move the fence out and within the setback. And one of the arguments for that is consistency with the neighbors. And that really doesn't hold water, because we knew when we did the fence ordinance that there would be pre-existing fences. So the intent of the fence ordinance wasn't to align fences with the other fences in the neighborhood. It was to not create big barriers. And if you look in our general plan, we avoid gated communities and whatnot. I asked about the existing fence, and because it is a legitimate issue to worry about your pets and whatnot, and it does appear that you can protect your pet by the existing fence that you have now. So I don't feel that I can make the finding that there's a cause for an exception that is unique to other people, that would be unique, and setting it apart from other situations where people want to build a 6-foot fence on the property line. So I am not able to support the exception.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions and then comments. Can staff provide any information as to the date of construction of the fences? There are pictures on pages 33 to 38.
Yes, the photos of the fences that were provided as part of the justification, those fences are located outside of the immediate neighborhood. And we did confirm that the fences existed prior to the 2019 update of the town's fence regulations.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you for that. And then the next question would be, do you know what the policy is behind the rule regarding 3-foot front and side yard fences?
Thank you for that question. This was part of what was discussed when the fence height exception or fence height regulations were updated in 2019. A 3-foot height front yard fence is a pretty standard height across other agencies. And so that was, in the end, the determination that instead of allowing the full height fences, as was previously allowed, that front yards, the aesthetic that was of interest to the town was to have the shorter fences, more open feel for those front yards.
Okay, so would it be fair to say that it's primarily aesthetically based?
That's my understanding of at least one of the components in that previous discussion.
Okay, thank you. And I guess my comment is that we do have difficulty in these cases because there are competing elements, and I respect the opinions of my fellow commissioners who are in favor of the exception, but I find that it would create a barrier type presence that would be unfriendly, and even though I know you have many neighbors who support you, but we have to look at the overall ordinance and when it's applicable to apply. And I think in this case that it would be appropriate because of the visual impact, which is, it's a large fence. So having said that, I guess we're ready for a motion. Commissioner Janoff, or to comment?
Yeah, another comment. So we understand the policy for the 3-foot fence in the front yard. The policy for the 3-foot fence on a side yard that's a street-facing yard. Could you comment on that?
Thank you for that question. I would say that that is primarily connected with the fact that the adjacent parcel then, that would be their front yard. And so if you're going to have continuity along the street frontage for all of those interior lots, and then you get to the corner lot and all of a sudden this 3-foot high fence limit goes up because it happens to be their street side yard, that it's related to that because it would actually be immediately adjacent to somebody's front yard.
Thank you. So I don't recall from the site visit whether the adjacent property on Moore has a 3-foot or not. So I don't recall what that circumstance looks like, but I'm still in favor of providing the appellant with the opportunity for more full use of the yard. There is a certain aesthetic regarding the 3-foot fence that I think could warrant pushing the proposed 6-foot fence back toward the rear of the house, so you still have view of the house. So you've got a more aesthetically pleasing corner as you're traversing in front of the house, but you allow the homeowner to move out, essentially extending its backyard. I would be in favor of that if that compromise would be acceptable to my fellow commissioners.
Commissioner Thomas?
If this is more of an aesthetic issue for some of my fellow commissioners, or one of my fellow commissioners, would softening that fence line with some additional like screening be helpful? I feel like, for me personally, I understand the fact that like if we have 3-foot fences and then all of a sudden a 6-foot fence for the corner because that's the side, but I feel like if there were some shrubs, obviously not junipers, I also just had to remove some of those, I understand, but some other sort of landscaping that would, create a softer transition and allow like for a good compromise on both ends.
I'd like to ask Commissioner Janoff if she could please describe for me in more detail what the proposed compromise is. I'm looking at the map.
Yes, I'm looking at Exhibit 6, which is a site plan. Yeah. I'm thinking two things, that rather than bring the fence to 18 inches from the curb, we perhaps pull it in a little bit so that we can landscape outside the fence and soften that, as Commissioner Thomas is suggesting, and then bringing the portion of the fence that tees into the side of the house back from that corner of the house further back, so that you essentially see more of the house if there were to be a 3-foot or no fence there. So moving the proposed fence back. Although I suppose if they want to keep the 6-foot where it is and then just do something to angle it out to give more space toward the rear of the yard, I think that would be acceptable. I think we have staff's consideration or description of the policy behind why we don't want a 3-foot to a 6-foot transition. But if the homeowner adjacent to the appellant is here saying that they're in favor of the 6-foot fence, then that sort of creates a moot point for me in terms of that issue. Nevertheless, if we wanted to create a softer transition between the two properties, I think a little landscaping and pushing that fence inward toward the property is a reasonable thing to do.
Commissioner Thomas?
I would also just like to add that there already is a buffer between the street. There's trees lining that street, so it is not as like, even if that fence is 18 inches from the sidewalk, from the property line, there is still some landscaping that provides some sort of softening. It's not like as abrupt as it would be. And I do agree with Commissioner Janoff that if the neighbor doesn't have a problem with it, that I'm happy to take that into consideration.
Commissioner Hanson?
How far within the side setback is the current fence?
The current fence is right at the edge of the required setback, so it is compliant with the current regulations as it currently is in place.
The reason for my question was I was going to ask if there was any room for them to move the fence at all without violating our ordinance.
In terms of proximity to the street side, the Moore Avenue side, it is right on the proper or the setback line.
Okay, thanks.
I'm going to ask Commissioner Janoff again what her thoughts are about the extent of freeing up portion of the setback, like not 18 inches, but further back. That's what I understood you were talking about, would be less of an encroachment on the setback.
Yes, in order to landscape that, to create a softer transition between the fence and the adjacent property. I'm not a landscape architect, but I would defer to staff for what a recommendation would be to be able to plant that with some sort of, and maybe 18 inches is sufficient, but that seems tight to me.
Okay, well, just to share my thought, I'm somewhat amenable to a compromise. I think 18 inches is not acceptable. I I believe that some landscaping softening would help a lot with the aesthetic issue. I think the question is how much to pull back from the sidewalk. My thought is that it should be significant rather than a small landscaping strip, but that's my opinion.
So I would offer 4 feet. That's a substantial width to be able to landscape. And, you know, I'm also looking at page 29 of the report, and I'm looking at this swath of bare dirt. And I think whatever we could do to make that a smaller swath of bare dirt, assuming it's not going to get landscaped, would be beneficial. So I would say 4 feet to allow substantial planting, interesting planting, and I would recommend that and this is completely up to the homeowner, I would either say that the proposed 6-foot fence could come out to the rear corner of the house, here, back here, which means that they would lose the portion that's within the 6-foot fence now, but they would gain this area at the side. So that we have that softer transition around the corner for aesthetic purposes.
Other comments? Commissioner Thomas?
I would recommend something smaller than 4 feet. As a person that does a lot of gardening myself, 4 feet deep is kind of difficult to get to. So typically like a 4-foot across bed, you need access on both sides. So I think that just like to ensure that the landscaping is easily maintained and isn't like, you can plant anything there, I would recommend like 2 or 3 feet. I know that 18 inches is pretty close to 2 feet and we weren't comfortable with that, but I think that 3 feet would be sufficient to plant something, but also easily accessible from the sidewalk area. And I think that 4 feet might end up being a large space to end up landscaping, and that would be kind of a big ask of us. I also support if we could just have the fence be left where it is right now. And I do have a question actually for staff about the strips along the sidewalk. Who is responsible for maintaining those?
We'll pass that off to Parks and Public Works staff.
James Watson, Parks and Public Works. That is within the town's right of way, so it is the town's responsibility to maintain that landscaping.
Okay, and right now, some of that landscaping is just bare. I mean, I understand we just are barely out of a drought, which also makes me hesitant to require extra planting of things by people. But is there any opportunity for the town to be able to like replant some of that area, or is that like a homeowners make requests for that, or homeowners just ending up taking responsibility for that in most cases?
Again, James Watson, Parks and Public Works. So typically the town doesn't plant much in our planter strips because they require irrigation, water connections, which we don't have throughout the town. So the town will plant a tree in the strips and then we water them as needed to get them to get settled in, and then we stop watering those trees as well. So no, the town doesn't have a policy of running and irrigation and planting the strips with decorative planting.
Okay, thank you. So with that information, I do think that there is an additional opportunity for some sort of softening to happen on that side of the sidewalk that would accomplish the same goals from my perspective. And so I guess that I'm more in favor of, with regards to a compromise, allowing the current fence to stay on the side. How do you describe where the side?
How do we?
I don't know. To stay.
The existing.
Where the existing front fence is facing the front yard, facing Roxbury. Leave that there and then extend the fence out, but leave 2 to 3 feet, maybe 2.5 feet of a buffer in order for planting on the side.
Well, my thought would be that going from 2 feet to 4 feet, which has been suggested by Commissioner Janoff, is not significant. And in fact, 4 feet would allow opportunities for landscaping that might be more special or diversified. And that I would agree with Commissioner Janoff's suggestion of moving the fence back to the rear of the house. So I'm okay now on those two elements. Commissioner Janoff.
Yeah, and I would just like to clarify that it would be possible to leave the fence, as Commissioner Thomas says, the fence that abuts into the side of the house, leave that 6-foot fence there, and then where it ends, it then can be, then draw from that line back to the corner to create the new 6-foot fence. So we don't have this strange, little section here. So we can go from this corner to the rear corner of the property with a 3 or 4 foot distance from the curb.
Thanks for that clarification. And Commissioner Thomas.
It's also just like a big round corner, so I feel like to be like hard angle, hard angle, hard angle is going to just, be more abrupt than if it is more of a curve. I mean, it's obviously you're not going to build a curved wood fence, but at an angle, jutting out at an angle. Yeah. Well, they want to reuse the wood, which I appreciate. So,
Commissioner Hanson, we haven't heard from you recently.
So I have a couple of comments. One is that it's sort of like either we follow the fence ordinance or we don't. So making it 4 feet instead of 18 inches really doesn't have any impact for me in terms of following the fence ordinance. And further, I would also say, since we had just, our family had just redone entirely, we have an acre lot, entirely our front and backyard. We ripped out junipers and ivy and all kinds of things that were harboring critters and everything like that, and put drought tolerant plants and everything. But the thing is that most of anything that you would want to do for a hedge, I mean, any kind of plants and take junipers off the table are going to of any size are going to need 5 or 6 feet all around at least to do that. So I'm not in favor of 4 feet because it basically is there. I don't see any difference between that and 18 inches. As to whether or not we can make some kind of compromise to move the fence out a little bit, that I think is possible. But we are setting a precedent. We don't really do precedents, but we're basically continuing this lack of complying with the fence ordinance when we do things like this.
Commissioner Jenna?
Thank you, and I appreciate that comment. I think that, as I said, I can find a special circumstance exists. When I think about the fence ordinance, and I think about it in terms of creating a safe visibility around the corner, and then the transitions to the adjacent properties, if those are the primary drivers in this sort of a property, then I'm comfortable finding an exception under Exception E. It may not be the case for all corner properties, but we've got plenty of site through the corner, and so I'm comfortable with that, and I'm comfortable creating a more aesthetic for the neighborhood by eliminating basically the dirt, the big 15-foot deep dirt easement or setback. So I think in making an exception to the fence ordinance, that it accomplishes what the fence ordinance wants to do in spirit, and I am comfortable with that. And that said, I'd be prepared to make a motion.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and do that, and then I'll have some further questions.
All right, so I move to approve the denial of a fence height exception request to locate an existing 6-foot tall fence within the required street side yard setback on property zoned R18, APN 407-31026, categorically exempt pursuant to the adopted guidelines for the implementation of California Environmental Quality Act, Section 15303, new construction or conversion of small structures, and Section 15301, existing facilities. Fence height exception application FHE-23-004. Property owner, applicant, appellant Jared Susov. Project planner Maria Chavarin. I can make the required findings for CEQA, and I can make the required findings for granting a fence height exception for item E of per town code section 29.40.0320.
Through the chair, just to clarify for the record that you are granting the appeal and approving the fence height exception through your motion?
Yes.
Thank you.
And is there a second? Mr. Thomas?
A second.
My question is, your motion, as I heard it, did not talk about a 4-foot height, a 4-foot setback, and also the revision related to the house.
Yes, the motion will include a requirement that the proposed 6-foot fence be moved to 4 foot from the curb. Is it the sidewalk? 4 foot from the sidewalk as opposed to 18 inches, and that it continues along the Moore Avenue until the corner of the rear corner of the house, and then makes some sort of a curve or change that connects it back to the front corner of the existing fence line.
Through the chair, if I might clarify, just to make sure we're understanding the motion. From what I heard, you are looking to have them maintain the existing fence, that the exception would be allowed starting at the rear corner of the house? No? Okay. Let's see if we can understand
No, that
it
there
better.
be a transition from the fence that dives, the short section of the fence that dives into the side of the house.
Correct.
It goes out toward Mort Avenue. From that point back toward the rear lot line, it makes a it will eventually get to
Okay.
4 feet from the sidewalk.
All right, let me try again then. So the exception would start at the location of the existing fence where the portion that is facing on Roxbury, and rather than extending all the way to the property line at Moore Avenue, as shown in the light green in one of the exhibits. And so it would, at that point, extend back towards the rear corner of the property, but never within 4 feet of that property line, always at least a 4-foot buffer.
Yes.
Is there any discussion? I'm seeing none. We have a motion and a second, so I'll call the question. Commissioner Hanson?
No.
Commissioner Thomas?
Yes.
Commissioner Janoff?
Yes.
And I vote yes, so it passes 3-1.
Through the chair, if I
And-
might clarify who seconded the motion? Just thank you.
And are there appeal rights on this matter?
There are, thank you. The decision of the commission can be appealed to town council by any interested person as defined by Town Code Section 2910.020 within 10 days on forms available online and fees paid. The final deadline is 4 p.m. on the 10th day.
Thank you very much. So we'll now move on to item 2 on our agenda for tonight, in which we are asked to consider an appeal of a community development director decision to deny a fence height exception request for construction of a 6-foot tall fence located within the required front yard setback, street side yard setback, and corner side triangle on property zone R18, located at 124 Garden Hill Drive, APN 424-23-084. Fence height exception application is FHE-23-005, categorically exempt under CEQA guidelines, section 15303, new construction or conversion of small structures, and section 15301, existing Facilities. The property owner is, I'm going to try and get this correct, Rushikesh Kulkarni. And the applicant appellant is Mr. Martin Lutinich, and the project planner is Ryan Safty. So can I see a show of hands who have visited the property? That's unanimous. And any disclosure? There are no disclosures. Okay, so Mr. Safty, do you have a staff report for us tonight?
Yes, thank you, Commissioners. Before you is an appeal of a Community Development Director decision to deny a fence height exception request at 124 Garden Hill Drive. The property is located in a single-family residential neighborhood, 1 block south of Lark Avenue and 1 block west of Highway 17. The property owner is requesting approval to construct a 6-foot-tall wooden fence within the required front yard setback, street side yard setback, and corner site triangle. The fence would be located along both the front and street side property lines. Per town code, fences and gates are limited to 3 feet in height when located within any of these areas, the front yard, the street side yard, or the corner site triangle. As noted in the staff report, the property has been redeveloped with 2 building permits over the past few years. During both of these building permit reviews, the project plans originally showed a 6-foot-tall fence out on the corner of this property. Town staff provided written comments on both of these building permits informing the property owners of our rules, and in both times the fence was reduced to the town required or town maximum 3-foot height. Both building permits were issued and finalized. On August 4th, the town received a complaint that the fence at this property was over 6 feet tall, and therefore we did on September 7th issue an administrative citation. Let's see, an exception request was submitted. For the exception, the applicant cited several conditions, B1, B2, D, and E. So for conditions B1 and B2, they are only applicable to the side and rear lot or property lines of interior lots, so therefore we could not consider those. For condition D, which is special security concern, the applicant claims a taller fence is needed as there have been coyote sightings within the neighborhood, and in order to protect their children playing within this front yard area, that the 3-foot fence would not quite do it. However, staff could not support the request under condition D as the property is located in an urbanized residential subdivision. If a coyote sighting was deemed a special security concern, then most of the properties in the town would be eligible for an exception. The owners are also allowed to install a taller fence if they move it back to meet our setback requirements. Lastly, as noted in the report, the owners were notified before and throughout the remodel process that the fence height at this location is limited to 3 feet. They proceeded with the house and remodel addition, which impacted which areas of the lot were available for outdoor use. For condition E, which is special circumstances associated with the property configuration, the applicant cited religious freedom, stating that their religion requires them to hold prayer sessions on the east side of the yard, and doing this with a 3-foot fence caused privacy concerns. However, similar to the reasons cited for condition D, staff could not support the request. The owners are allowed to move the fence back and increase the height, and additionally, they were aware of our fence height requirements during this process. In addition to planning not being able to support the height exception, the town engineer also could not support the exception to the corner site triangle. For these reasons, the town denied the exception request on September 27th. On October 5th, this denial was appealed. However, the appeal did not bring up any new points for consideration tonight. Neighbor support letters were received yesterday. We received about 6 or 7 of them, and they were distributed today as a desk item. Town staff also noticed a potential publishing error with Exhibit 2. It sounds like maybe not all of you guys had this issue. In any event, if the director can please share the screen so I can just quickly outline what this was supposed to show. So the area in green identifies the areas of the fence and wall that are compliant with code. I guess it's more of a neon green on that screen. The area in red shows the portions of the fence that do not comply with code and either require an exception or must be removed. And that red area is somewhat difficult to see, but it's on top of the green extending to the right of it. As well as I highlighted both the front and street side property lines, so it was clear to the commissioners, as well as where that corner site triangle requirements would be applicable. Based on the discussion provided in the staff report, staff does recommend the Planning Commission deny the appeal, uphold the decision of the director, and deny the fence height exception. This concludes staff's presentation, and both planning staff and Parks and Public Works staff are here to answer any questions.
Thank you for that report, and I'll ask my fellow commissioners if they have questions at this time. I don't see any. So we'll now open the public portion of our public meeting tonight and give the appellant an opportunity to address the commission for up to 5 minutes. And I see Mr. Lutnich approaching, so if you just come to the mic, and we'll be happy to hear what you have to say.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing us to speak tonight. First of all, with regard to the document that was just shown on the screen, the red portion of the fence that's along the side yard was approved and permitted according to the permits that we have. So I don't know why all of a sudden that is not permitted. It used to go all the way around, and then we removed the section just above the 3-foot line. Basically, the problem that we have with this is if you've been out to the scene, out to the site, there is absolutely no problem with viewing any traffic or pedestrians. There's plenty of room on the sidewalk. The main issue here, I think, is there isn't an intersecting street. Our lot basically is a lot that has one street that it abuts, and that's Garden Hill Drive. The only one that comes close to being considered a street intersection would be Farm Hill, which is a cul-de-sac. The other one is Green Hill, which is also a cul-de-sac. The cul-de-sac at Farm Hill parallels or it runs right into and stops where it intersects Garden Hill. So it's really not an intersection there. Our property abuts only one street, and under most codes, a piece of property that abuts one street is an interior lot. It is not a corner lot. So I don't think the rules that you're applying to the street and to our property is appropriate to begin with. Could we show the video? I'm sure you've already seen the pictures, and maybe you've already seen the video. Okay, this is driving down Garden Hill, going around the corner where the fence is. There's absolutely no vision problems from a vehicle. We're going to turn around here and come back the other way, and this is going back down Garden Hill, and that's the fence across the street. Now this is parked on Green Hill Road, the little visitor to the street. But there's absolutely no, and there's still photos in your file that show that there is no obstruction. This is Green Hill. Looking out there, you can see all the way down and around that corner. And on Farm Hill, that truck is going right, turning left there. If he would have gone absolutely straight without turning, he would have gone right into Farm Hill Road. So there's just, from everything I've been able to find, that would not be considered that's coming out of Farm Hill. That it wouldn't be considered a corner lot, and a street triangle regulation would not be required. The concern about the coyote is he has small children that play in his yard. And we'll show you the yard in a second. That's the yard inside, and all of the bamboo you can see is where the 3-foot fence would be. If you move that back by the setback required, it takes almost a third of his yard away. And there'd be absolutely no reason to do that, aesthetically or any other reason. We have support of the neighbors. We have support of what I believe is the definition under what the streets are and whether or not there needs to be a traffic triangle there. I thank you. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and we'll see if there are any questions for you. I don't see any. I have a question. When you learned of the town's position regarding the site triangle, did you have any direct verbal communication with the town about their interpretation?
I've mentioned it several times. Everybody continues to say it needs to have a street triangle there, traffic triangle. I don't see why.
Okay. And then I had another question for you. Can you explain why the fence height application exception was withdrawn on April 12th, 2023? That was the earlier point in time prior to the current application.
I don't understand the question.
I understand that there was an earlier application for a fence height exception, and that was withdrawn.
I was not involved at that time.
Looks like your client is, and
He would be able to answer.
ask you to state your name and address.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Rushi Kulkarni. I'm the owner of 124 Garden Hill. The earlier application was withdrawn simply because we were in the process of getting the construction permits, and we had initially appealed with the town to grant permission to erect a 6-foot fence over there. And once they had said that that would not be in conformance with the ordinance, in the interest of moving forward with the construction process and not getting stalled with respect to getting the final occupancy permit, we decided to put that issue on the side and revisit it later as we did. So that's the reason why we withdrew that initial request for exception, as it was not granted.
Okay, are there any questions of the owner? I don't see any. If you can stay there, I don't care which one of you answers. So you were aware of the fence ordinance when you submitted your plans and they were approved by the town. That was the change from the 6-foot to the 3-foot was something the town had communicated to you was necessary, and you changed the plans to conform to the town's position?
That is correct. We were aware and the town had informed us. We were challenging the assumption of the corner street definition because according to my read of the ordinance, it says that a corner triangle is defined as the intersection of 2 streets, and the setback requirements are 30 feet from the point of intersection. In this case, if you notice the corner around which the street turns, the street that comes in and then continues is both Garden Hill Drive. There are no 2 streets. There's also a double yellow line as opposed to a dotted yellow line, which means there's technically not even a divider on the street, whereby traffic is technically not even allowed to turn left. So it's a through street where the traffic is supposed to just drive through. So my interpretation was that it's not a corner, and I had challenged that assumption, but at the end of the day, the visiting inspector on site said that, and this was perhaps, if my memory serves right, it was either Inspector Eric or Inspector Bobby, but one of the two, they mentioned that that ordinance is open to interpretation of the inspection officer and the planning department, and it is their interpretation and their point of view that you have to go by. So again, in the interest of pursuing the construction on time, as well as my needs to finance and refinance the project on time, given how interest rates were moving, I decided to drop the issue. That wasn't necessarily me acknowledging or agreeing with the town's position, but more accepting that it is an issue that I will revisit later.
I see. Thank you for that. Other commissioner questions at this time? I'm not seeing any. So we'd normally open this for public comment. Is there anyone on Zoom?
We would invite anyone on Zoom who wishes to speak on this to raise their hand. It does look like we've got a few people who are raising their hand to speak on this item.
Okay, if you wish to go forward with that, I appreciate it.
So the first to speak will be Michael.
Yes, hi. I live on 295 Garden Hill Drive. I drive past this corner every day and have for the last 4 years when I purchased the property originally. I am very much in support of the height of this fence. In fact, when I first saw the shorter fence, I thought that it was a mar in the vision of the neighborhood. It was strange to look into my neighbor's backyard. I didn't actually know my neighbor at the time, and after I got to meet him, I asked him about this, and he had explained what had occurred. I think it is a more aesthetic view. I have no concern at all about the visibility as I'm coming around Garden Hill Drive in either direction. Like I said, I drive this every day, and I'm aware of the coyotes and other wild animals, and I agree that there is a safety risk for his family. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments.
The next speaker will be, looks like Himanshu.
Hi, my name is Himanshu. I am a resident on the Farm Mill Way, which is the adjoining street. Again, like as the other neighbor, like I cross this daily multiple times, like every time I need to leave or come to my house. I have not once faced any visibility problem on this corner. So I don't think like that's a concern, at least from the residents on the Farm Mill Way side. And I do see the concern regarding the coyote and safety. And I do feel that, it's a higher fence, would be beneficial. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Next speaker will be, looks like Niket.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. This is Niket. We live just across the street on 135 Green Hill Way, and we've lived there for about 5.5 years. I have no concerns with the height of the fence being increased as well. In fact, like our kids play in Rishi's backyard a lot of times, and we in fact get worried with the shorter fence for our kids as well. So again, we've been living here about 5.5 years, and I see no safety concerns. I drive there every day.
Okay, thank you very much, sir.
Next will be Google Pixel 7.
Sorry about that. My name is Nguyen Liu, and I'm living on a 123 Green Hill Way. There's two things that I want to mention. Well, like Mike said earlier, I'm driving through this road every day because that's how I get to Highway 17. So initially, when I first saw it, one side was high and the other one was low. I thought it looks really strange, and I don't really like it. But when I talked to Rishi and I asked him, say, "Oh, this is just because of the regulation and things like that." But the second issue I want to say is the safety concern. And to be honest, I'm living in cul-de-sacs, and I got my car broke in. I talked to my neighbor within the same neighbors with the same cul-de-sac, and my neighbor on 131s and 135. They both have people come into their front yard and go through their cars at night. So I love that to be a safe town, but the reality of it is not. So I think it's just important to be able to feel safe living here. So yeah, that's my comment.
Thank you, sir. Any further public members on Zoom?
I don't see any other hands raised, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. And so now the applicant and or his attorney may come forth with any additional comments you wish to make, up to 3 minutes. Not required to.
The one comment I just want to point out is when you look at an intersecting street, the corner lots are usually on each side of that street, and it forms the area that the triangle applies to. If you look at the situation on this street, there is no such thing. If it was Green Hill directly across from the driveway side, there's no shoulder on our side or curve on our side for a triangle to fit on. And on the other side, it's the two lots that are on either side of Farm Hill that would be considered corner lots. Our lot's not a corner lot.
Thank you, sir. Any questions at this time? If not, I'll close the public portion of the public hearing and ask commissioners if they have questions for staff, wish to comment on the appeal, or introduce a motion for consideration by the commission. Commissioner Hanson.
I have a question for staff. On this interpretation of the corner versus other lot, when I was looking at the plans, it looked to me like you were marking it relative to the 15 feet, not for a greater setback, but is it the case that if it is determined to be a corner lot, that the setback is double?
The setback itself doesn't change based on the corner lot. The corner lot requirements, though, I will let Parks and Public Works answer that question.
James Watson, Parks and Public Works. I'm not sure I completely understand the question. You're wanting...
Well, the appellant was, applicant appellant was contesting the interpretation of the corner lot. And one of the things that was mentioned was having to have a greater setback on account of being determined to be a corner lot. So I'm just trying to verify, A, is that the case in our ordinance? And B, what is the current situation in terms of the setback? Because I was looking at the plans and it looked like it was marked for 15 feet.
So I can try again to answer that question, as long as it's not related to the ins and outs of the corner site requirements. If this was not a corner lot, and let's say we treated both of these property frontages as a front yard, it would actually be more of a setback requirement for the fences. One thing to clarify, the corner site triangle is just one aspect that staff cannot support. There's still a 6-foot tall fence within the front and street side yard setback requirements, and those are completely different.
Right, okay. I think that answered my question, so, okay.
Commissioner Thomas, I think you had your hand raised. No? No? Okay. There's the issue of religious practice that was mentioned in the appeal, and I wonder if staff has any comment on that issue.
Thank you. So we did check in with the town attorney on this question. It is clear that the Federal Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Persons Act does apply here. There's a few things that the law prohibits, but based on the town attorney's read, the town is treating the residents the same as others, and so this law has not been violated. It's not a significant burden. It's necessary for traffic visibility and is the least restrictive means in that the residents have the option of abiding by the setback requirement.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. And are there other questions? Commissioner Janoff.
For staff, the applicant appellant has argued that this is not a corner lot by definition. Can you please comment on that?
Parks and Public Works, James Watson. If Mike Vroman's available online still? Oh, he got off.
Yes, no, I'm here. Mike Vroman, Senior Traffic Engineer. And I would have to disagree with the attorney that from a traffic engineering perspective, if there is an intersection with Garden Hill Drive and Farm Hill Way. You could also make the contention that Green Hill is may also be, because it's directly across from 124 Garden Hill, and could also be part of that intersection. But there's definitely an intersection with Garden Hill Drive and Farm Hill Way. So by that means, I would say it is a corner lot from a traffic perspective.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, sir, we've closed the public hearing, so it's among the commissioners and staff at this point. Thank you for understanding. Other questions or comments? Let me check my notes.
Through the chair, I can also share the definition of corner lot from the town code, in case that's helpful.
Thank you.
A corner lot means a lot situated at the intersection of two or more streets or bounded on two or more abutting sides by street lines. So based on my experience with the town code, it would not be important that the same name was applied to those two sides. In this case, we have two street side property lines that are perpendicular to each other, and so we would determine that to be a corner lot.
Thank you for that. Commissioner Janoff.
Thank you. One other question regarding the testimony of the applicant appellant, who argued that the 6-foot fence toward the rear of the property was approved in the drawing package, and yet in the diagram that you provided us and showed on the screen, that section of the fence, which is 6 foot tall, is indicated as out of compliance. Could you really comment on that?
Certainly, and thank you for the question. So staff did provide the building permit plan sets, the final approved building permit plan sets for both of them. There was not an approved 6-foot fence out there. There was an approved, on the side that they're referring to, a 3-foot garden wall, which was built, or, sorry, I apologize, don't know if that portion was built, but that was not in the approved plans.
Thank you.
There are no other, Commissioner Henson, please.
I don't have a question. I do have a comment, though. As I said on the other hearing this evening, these are very difficult because we didn't have this stringent of a fence ordinance prior to 2019. There are a lot of people out there that have pre-existing fences. This may not be the case. I'm sympathetic to hearing that a 3-foot fence doesn't provide security, but this is what was decided when the town created a fence ordinance. It was approved by the town council, and this requirement for the 3-foot fence, it was known that it wasn't going to provide a lot of security. And I think, as staff mentioned, with all due respect, I mean, coyotes are a concern, but we do have this fence ordinance. It's applicable to everybody in their front yard, the 3-foot fence. And so I'm having trouble finding that there's cause for granting the appeal, as I'm not hearing that the justification is there based on undue hardship or a special privacy concern that isn't applicable to anyone else in town.
Thank you. Other commissioners? Or we're open for a motion. Commissioner Janoff.
Thank you. Yes, and on this item, a significant concern for me is the fact that our staff, our traffic staff, does find an issue that this is a corner lot, unlike the item that we saw before. And so I will not be supporting the appeal.
Commissioner Thomas?
I want to echo Commissioner Janoff's comments. It's really, I understand the applicant's concerns, and I think that I appreciate all of the work that you've done, and the home that you have built is really gorgeous and lovely, a lovely part of that neighborhood. However, the issue with the traffic, I think according to our town, I'm seeing this as a corner lot, as according to town staff. And because of that traffic site, that triangle is something that I think needs to be prioritized and is important. And so I am not in support of granting this appeal with how this fence is structured at this moment.
Thank you for that. And I share the same concern. I think as the Planning Commission, we don't have any independent legal basis to challenge our staff's report, and this is a safety issue, which is always a concern. And while I share my fellow commissioners' comments about the hard work you've put into this, and we respect that very much, I'm unable to support it primarily because of the town's Public Works Department statement and conclusions. So we might be open for a motion. Mr. Thomas, yes.
I move to deny the appeal of the Community Development Director's decision to deny a fence height exception request for construction of a 6-foot tall fence located within the required front yard setbacks, street side yard setback, and corner site triangle on property zoned R-18 APN to 424-23084. I think that's all. I don't have to make any findings, correct?
No findings required.
Is there a second to that motion? Commissioner Hanson?
I second the motion.
Any discussion? If not, please raise your hand if you're in support of the motion. And it passes unanimously. Thank you very much for coming tonight and sharing your thoughts and also submitting the materials in advance.
And through the chair,
appeals.
The decision of the committee can be appealed to town council by any interested person as defined by town code section 2910-020 within 10 days on forms available online with fees paid. Final deadline is 4 p.m. on the 10th day.
Thank you. And so now we'll move on to other business, starting with the report from the planning manager on behalf of the Community Development Department.
Thank you, Chair. So a few updates on activities at Town Council. Last night, the Town Council held their first meeting of the month, and they did continue discussion of the housing element overlay zone. That zone was created by Town Council last night, and the vote was to apply it to all but one of the sites in the site's inventory. The consideration of applying the housing element overlay zone to the site at 101 South Santa Cruz, often referenced as the post office site, was postponed to a future meeting for consideration when further information is available. They also considered and adopted the accessory dwelling unit ordinance updates. They chose to retain the parking requirements rather than the recommendation of removing them from Planning Commission, but otherwise upheld Planning Commission's recommendations as well as some additional design standards recommended by staff. As mentioned at our last meeting, the discussion of the story pole policy was initiated on August 1st, and it's currently scheduled to continue on December 4th with Town Council. Commission recruitments are still open until this Friday. It's due at 4 p.m. Applications are available online through the Clerk's Department. Also, the interviews will be scheduled for December 6th. A special Planning Commission meeting is currently scheduled for next Wednesday to consider the updated draft of the housing element. That's November 15th. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And now we'll go on to subcommittee reports, and we have the Housing Element Advisory Board, including GPAC, the Historic Preservation Commission, and Conceptual Development Advisory Committee has no report for today. Are there any reports from GPAC HEB? And we don't have Historic Preservation. Okay, that makes it fast. No other commission matters, I assume? No. So thank you all for your participation tonight and for the members of the public who joined us, and I will call the meeting adjourned.